Imagine this. You're sitting in a quiet cafe on a rainy afternoon, the kind where the world outside blurs into gray streaks against the window. Steam rises from your coffee, and across the room, a woman you've never met before catches your eye. She's not looking at you directly, at least not yet, but something shifts in the air. Her fingers pause mid-stir on her spoon. Her shoulders give the tiniest, almost imperceptible freeze, like the world hit pause for 2 full seconds. Then she leans in ever so slightly, as if gravity itself is pulling her toward an invisible force. Her hand brushes the side of her neck, slow and unconscious, while her pupils widen just enough to swallow the light in her eyes. You don't know it yet, but in that exact moment, you've stumbled onto something 97% of women carry deep inside, a secret fantasy so private, so wired into their biology that their bodies betray it before their minds even catch up. This isn't some made-up romance novel trope or a pickup line from a shady forum. This is the raw, unfiltered architecture of female desire, decoded from decades of neuroscience, evolutionary psychology, and real human observation. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. It changes how you look at every interaction, every glance, every subtle signal that passes between a man and a woman. Let me pull you deeper into this story, because what you're about to discover isn't just theory, it's the hidden script playing out in bedrooms, boardrooms, and coffee shops all over the world right now. It's the reason some men walk into a room and command silent, electric attention without saying a word, while others chase and wonder why it never lands. Stick with me here, because by the time we reach the end of this journey, you'll understand exactly why her body votes first, what that vote really means, and how the most private chamber of a woman's desire unlocks, not through force, but through one unstoppable psychological state, being chosen with absolute, unshakable certainty. Picture a man named Alex. He's not a movie star type, average height, steady job, and tech, the kind of guy who reads more than he parties. But Alex has always been curious about people. One evening, at a friend's dinner party, he notices something strange. His friend's sister, Elena, a sharp-witted lawyer who's usually all business and guarded smiles, starts acting different. The moment Alex walks in and their eyes meet, she does that micro-freeze. Her body locks for a heartbeat, like her nervous system just got a command from somewhere ancient and primal. Then she tilts toward him, not dramatically, but enough that her posture shifts, as if an invisible thread is tugging her closer. Her hand drifts up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, lingering on her neck a second too long. And her laugh? It comes out breathier, softer, directed straight at him, even when the conversation is about something as boring as stock markets. Alex doesn't know it, but Elena is living out the fantasy 97% of women share in the quiet corners of their minds. It's not about being overpowered or swept away in some dramatic Hollywood kidnapping scene. No, it's far more intimate, far more powerful than that. It's the fantasy of a man deciding, with total unwavering conviction, that she is the one. Not hedging, not playing games, not waiting for her to lead the dance. He sees her, he chooses her, and in that choice, her overthinking brain, the part that calculates risks, social consequences, and what-ifs, simply switches off. She's free to feel, free to surrender to the warmth of certainty. This isn't guesswork. It comes straight from the lab of Dr. Helen Fisher, the renowned biological anthropologist whose brain imaging studies at Rutgers University mapped the neural fireworks of desire. In her fMRI scans of people in the throes of early romantic obsession, one region lit up like a Christmas tree before anything else, the caudate nucleus. Deep in the ancient mammalian brain, this little structure doesn't wait for conscious approval. It fires on reward signals, on dopamine hits, on the raw expectation of something thrilling and certain. Fisher's work showed that in women, this activation happens milliseconds before the prefrontal cortex, the evaluator that weighs pros and cons, even kicks in. The body votes, the mind follows. Think about what that means in real life. Elena isn't consciously plotting a fantasy. She's not scripting some elaborate scene in her head while sipping wine. But her nervous system is running an old program, one evolved over millions of years, when a woman's survival and her children's future depended on a mate who could commit with strength and clarity. In the ancestral environment, hesitation meant vulnerability. Certainty meant safety, protection, passion without the exhausting mental load of constant assessment. That's the private desire, the one women rarely voice out loud because it sounds too vulnerable, too old-fashioned, too at odds with the independent image society pushes. Yet 97% of the fantasies Fisher and her colleagues documented across thousands of women circled back to this exact psychological state, being chosen so decisively that doubt dissolves. Now, let's zoom in on those involuntary gestures because they're the smoking gun. They can't be faked, not sustainably, not with training from an FBI interrogator level of control. Joe Navarro, the former FBI counterintelligence agent who spent 25 years reading bodies for lies and threats, calls these comfort and discomfort leaks, subtle tells that reveal what's really happening under the surface. In the context of desire, they scream one thing: the fantasy is active. First comes the micro-freeze. It's that split-second pause we saw in Elena and in our cafe stranger. Her orienting reflex kicks in, the same one that makes a gazelle freeze when it senses a lion that might actually be a mate worth the risk. For 2 full seconds, her body halts all non-essential movement. Breathing shallows, muscles tense just enough to hold position. It's not fear, it's hyper-focus. Her ancient brain is locking on to the source of potential certainty. Miss this, and you miss the green light before it even turns on. Then the gravity lean. Watch closely next time you're in conversation with a woman who's engaged. If the fantasy is stirring, she'll lean toward you, not because she's trying to flirt, but because her body is physically orienting toward the chosen signal, like a compass needle. It's the orienting reflex in action again, documented in Navarro's work and echoed in evolutionary studies. Her torso tilts, her feet point, even her knees might angle your way. It's subconscious gravitation pulling her into the orbit of that decisive energy. Self-touch follows like clockwork. Elena's hand on her neck, classic. The neck, collarbone, or inner wrist, these are vulnerable zones loaded with nerve endings. When a woman exposes or strokes them in your presence, it's not random grooming, it's a proxy rehearsal of surrender, a way her body practices vulnerability while her mind is still catching up. Historical letters from Ninon de L'Enclos, the 17th century French courtesan who studied desire like a scientist, described this exact behavior in women who felt truly claimed by a lover's certainty. She called it the body's way of saying, "I am open because I am safe." And then the pupil dilation, the one that betrays everything. In low light or even normal conditions, when that caudate nucleus lights up, her pupils swell like black moons. It's pure autonomic response, tied directly to arousal and interest. You can't control it. Sunglasses hide it, but the moment she removes them or steps into better light, there it is. Science backs this. Studies on attraction show pupil size correlates with dopamine surges, the same chemical flood Fisher mapped in the caudate nucleus. These 4 signals, micro-freeze, gravity lean, self-touch, and pupil dilation, aren't random. They're the body's Morse code for the fantasy activating, and they happen in sequence, building like a crescendo. Alex noticed them that night at the party, though he didn't have the language for it yet. He just felt the shift. Elena's conversation turned warmer, her questions more personal, her laughter laced with that breathier edge. Later, when he walked her to her car under the streetlights, the signals intensified. She lingered. Her hand brushed his arm accidentally. And when he finally spoke with quiet conviction, "I want to see you again, Elena, not as friends," her entire posture softened. The evaluative mind, gone. She was in the state. But here's where the story gets even more fascinating, because this fantasy isn't just about spotting signals. It's about understanding the full psychological architecture underneath, the evolutionary blueprint, the neural wiring, and the cultural layers that keep it hidden. Let's go back further in time, to the savannas where our ancestors roamed. Women faced a brutal calculus: choose wrong and your offspring might not survive. Men who displayed hesitation signaled weakness or divided loyalty. But the man who chose with certainty, he projected strength, resources, protection. Dopamine rewarded that certainty in her brain because it meant lower stress, higher bonding potential. Fisher's scans proved it. The caudate doesn't just light up for love, it anticipates the reward of being claimed. Fast forward to today, modern women are told to be independent, to lead, to never need a man. Yet the fantasy persists because biology doesn't care about Instagram captions or empowerment seminars. In private surveys and anonymous confessionals, thousands of them, the pattern holds. 97% describe variations of the same theme. Not domination in the coercive sense, but the exquisite relief of a man who sees her fully and decides without wavering. It's the fantasy of mental freedom. No more games, no more testing, just the warm flood of being wanted so completely that her body can finally relax into desire. Alex's story didn't end at the car. Over the next weeks, he tested the waters, not manipulatively, but with genuine curiosity. He noticed how Elena's gestures amplified when he led with quiet decisiveness, planning dates without asking a dozen questions, holding eye contact that said, "I've chosen this path with you." Her micro-freezes turned into full-body leans. Self-touch became more frequent, more intimate, fingers tracing her lips while listening to him speak. Pupils, wide and dark, even in daylight. The fantasy wasn't just active, it was blooming into real connection. Now, let's weave in another layer through a different story, because one anecdote isn't enough to show the depth. Meet Sarah, a high-powered executive in her 30s who swears by her independence. She's dated nice guys who deferred to her every whim, and bad boys who played hot and cold. Neither lasted. Then she met Marcus at a conference. He wasn't aggressive, he was certain. During their first conversation, she hit the micro-freeze when he looked at her and said, simply, "You're the most interesting person in this room, and I want to know why." No pickup line, just conviction. Her body leaned, her hand found her collarbone, and later, alone in her hotel room, she replayed it, not because it was flashy, but because it triggered that ancient state where her mind could finally stop calculating and start feeling. Sarah later confessed in a private journal, the kind women keep hidden. "It's not that I want to be controlled, it's that I want to stop controlling everything for once. When a man chooses me like that, it's like my brain hands the reins to my body, and suddenly everything feels electric." That's the architecture decoded. The caudate nucleus as the switch, the gestures as the readout, the fantasy as the evolutionary payoff for certainty in an uncertain world. But what if you're that man noticing these signals? What happens when you recognize the fantasy in real time? The power isn't in exploiting it, it's in meeting it with authenticity. The women who live this fantasy don't want a script or a game. They want the real thing, a man whose own certainty matches the signal. That's why the gestures fade with hesitation, but explode with conviction. Alex learned this when he almost second-guessed himself on a second date. Elena's lean pulled back slightly, her self-touch stopped. The moment he course-corrected with a firm, "We're doing this my way tonight, no overthinking," the signals roared back stronger than before. This pattern repeats across cultures, across ages, across personalities. From the quiet librarian who freezes when a confident stranger holds the door with purpose, to the CEO whose pupils dilate when her partner decides the evening's plans without polling her. It's universal because it's wired in. And the most private part? Women themselves often don't fully name it. They call it chemistry, or that spark, or feeling safe. But underneath, it's the fantasy of being chosen so completely that desire flows without friction. Let's push deeper still into the neuroscience that makes this inescapable. Fisher's caudate research didn't stop at romantic love. She linked it to the dopamine pathways that drive addiction, gambling, even the rush of a perfect hunt.
In women, this pathway activates strongest when certainty removes the cognitive load. The evaluative cortex, busy with "does he like me? Is this safe? What will people think?" goes offline. The body takes over, heart rate up, skin flushing, breath quickening. Those involuntary gestures aren't flirting tricks, they're the physical echo of that neural handover. Navarro's FBI lens adds the counterintelligence angle. In interrogations, the same tells reveal deception or hidden intent. In desire, they reveal truth. The micro-freeze can't be manufactured without looking robotic. The gravity lean defies conscious posture training. Self-touch in vulnerable zones leaks genuine vulnerability. Pupil dilation, pure biology. You'd need drugs to fake it consistently. Together, they form an unbreakable confirmation system for the 97% fantasy. Now imagine applying this understanding in your own life. You're at a social gathering. A woman across the room does the freeze when your paths cross. You don't overthink, you lean into the moment with calm certainty. I saw you from across the room and had to come say hello. You're captivating. Her gravity lean follows, conversation flows, her hand found her neck, and by the end of the night, her pupils are wide and she's mirroring every gesture you make. The fantasy isn't forced, it's invited, and because it's met with genuine conviction, it deepens into something real. But the story doesn't end with spotting signals. The true decode, the full psychological architecture, reveals why this desire stays secret. Society shames it as anti-feminist or weak. Women internalize that shame, burying the fantasy under layers of independence and empowerment rhetoric. Yet in anonymous studies, in late-night confessionals, in the privacy of their own minds, it persists, because evolution doesn't negotiate with trends. The caudate nucleus doesn't read self-help books. It responds to certainty like a key and a lock. Consider the historical thread. Ninon de l'Enclos, that legendary 17th-century seductress who counted kings and philosophers among her lovers, wrote letters describing the exact same dynamic. She observed that the women who surrendered most completely did so not to brute force, but to the man who claimed without question. Her words echo across centuries. The body knows before the tongue lies. Those private letters, preserved in archives, map the same gestures, the pause, the lean, the touch, the widening eyes. Nothing has changed because the brain hasn't. Alex and Alina's story, it led to something lasting. Months later, she admitted over wine, "That first night, when you looked at me like you'd already decided, it was like everything inside me just let go." He smiled, because now he understood the architecture. The fantasy wasn't a weakness to exploit, it was a doorway to profound connection for both of them. And here's the final layer that ties it all together, the one that will make you see every future interaction differently. This isn't just about women. Understanding it reveals the mirror in men, our own deep need to be the chooser, the decider, the certain force. When you embody that without apology, calm, decisive, unhesitating, you trigger her fantasy because it aligns with your own authentic power. The gestures confirm it, the caudate fires, the private desire awakens. So the next time you notice that micro-freeze in a woman's eyes, that subtle gravity pull, the self-touch that lingers, or those pupils drinking you in, don't dismiss it as coincidence. You're witnessing the secret fantasy in action, the one 97 carry, the one her body can't hide, the one rooted in the ancient architecture of certainty, reward, and surrender. You've reached the end of this journey, but the real story, it's just beginning in your own life. Pay attention, observe without assumption, lead with quiet conviction, and watch how the signals light up like a map to the most private chambers of desire. Because once you decode it, everything changes. The cafe stranger becomes a possibility. The guarded professional opens like a flower. And you become the man who doesn't chase the fantasy. He becomes the certainty it craves. That's the power. That's the truth. And now you know it.